There's a problem that every rural water department in America faces at least once a year. And it's not a problem that technology solves. The problem is, where's the pipe? Not the pipe on the map. The map has the pipe. The map shows every main, every lateral, every valve, every hydrant in the system, drawn by engineers, recorded in archives, digitized into GIS databases that can display the entire water network on a screen with satellite precision coordinates accurate to 3 feet. The problem is that the pipe in the ground is not where the map says it is. The pipe was laid in 1948, or 1936, or 1962. It was laid by a crew that followed a surveyor's stakes. Stakes that were set from a road center line that has since been moved, or a property corner that was incorrectly platted, or a benchmark that was a fence post that rotted in 1971. The pipe is in the ground. The map says it's 20 feet east of the road. The pipe is actually 14 feet east of the road, or 30, or 40, or on the other side of the road entirely, because the crew that laid it in 1948 adjusted the route to avoid a rock ledge that the surveyor didn't know was there and that nobody recorded on the as-built drawings, because the crew foreman figured nobody would ever need to find the pipe again. Somebody always needs to find the pipe again. On a Wednesday morning in October of 2003, the Franklin County Public Service Authority needed to find a 12-inch cast iron water main that had been laid in 1951 along Route 122 outside of Rocky Mount, Virginia. The main had developed a leak, not a catastrophic break, but a steady loss that was draining the system of approximately 40,000 gallons per day. The leak was underground, the pipe was underground, and the records that should have showed exactly where the pipe was underground were wrong. The GIS map showed the main running 22 feet east of the road center line at a depth of 4 feet for a distance of 1,400 feet between 2 valve stations. The water department's locating crew, 2 men with a radio detection RD8100 pipe locator, which uses electromagnetic signals to trace buried metallic pipes, had walked the route 3 times and gotten 3 different readings. The first pass said the pipe was 18 feet from the road. The second said 26. The third said 14. The electromagnetic readings were scattered because the cast iron main was surrounded by other metallic utilities, a gas line, a telephone conduit, an abandoned electrical conduit from a 1960s road improvement, and the locator couldn't distinguish the water main signal from the interference. The locating crew called their supervisor. The supervisor called the department director. The department director called a private utility locating company, Accurate Locating Services, out of Roanoke, $180 per hour, minimum 4 hours, and was told they couldn't come until Friday. The leak was costing the system 40,000 gallons per day. At the current water rate, that was $240 per day in lost revenue. 2 days of waiting for the locating company. $480 in water loss, plus the $720 minimum for the service call. $1,200 to find a pipe that was somewhere within 40 feet of where the record said it was. "We know it's out there," the supervisor told his crew. "We just can't find the damn thing. Stay with me, because the man who found it didn't use a $12,000 pipe locator or a $180 per hour service call. He used a forked stick in 40 years of knowing what the ground does when there's water underneath it. Let me tell you about Vernon Slaughter, because Vernon was standing on his porch, watching the water department crew walk back and forth along Route 122 with their electronic locator. And he'd been watching for most of the morning with the patience of a man who already knows where the pipe is. Vernon was 77 years old. He'd farmed 160 acres on the east side of Route 122 since 1966. Cattle, hay, tobacco, the standard Blue Ridge foothills operation. His farm bordered the road for a quarter-mile, and the 12-inch water main that the crew was trying to find ran along his fence line. Vernon's property, Vernon's fence, Vernon's ground. Vernon's grandfather, Otis Slaughter, had been a water witch, a dowser, a man who found underground water with a forked stick. In the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, water witching was not superstition, it was a trade. Before modern well drilling, before hydrogeological surveys, before ground-penetrating radar and electromagnetic locators, the man who could find water was the most valuable man in the county. Every farm needed a well, every well needed water, and the man with the forked stick could tell you where to dig. Otis had found water for over 100 wells in Franklin County between 1920 and 1955. His success rate, the percentage of wells that hit water where he said to dig, was, according to the county well driller who kept records, 87%. 87 out of 100 wells hit water where Otis pointed his stick. The other 13 were dry, either because the water was deeper than the well driller could reach, or because the underground conditions had shifted between the dowsing and the drilling. Was it real? Was the stick actually detecting water? That's a question that scientists have been arguing about for 400 years, and I'm not going to settle it in this story. What I can tell you is this: whatever Otis was doing, whether the stick was responding to underground water, or whether Otis was unconsciously reading surface signs that indicated subsurface moisture, the result was an 87% success rate. The expensive alternative, drilling test holes at random, had a success rate in Franklin County of approximately 60%. Otis beat random chance by 27 percentage points using a forked peach twig. Otis had taught Vernon, not the theory. There wasn't a theory. The practice, how to cut the stick, a fresh Y-shaped branch from a peach tree, approximately 18 inches long on each arm of the Y and 6 inches on the stem. Green wood with the bark on, flexible enough to bend but stiff enough to resist casual movement. How to hold it. One arm of the Y in each hand, palms up, the stem pointing forward. Grip firm but not locked, the wrists slightly rotated outward so the stick was under light tension. How to walk. Slow, steady, 6-inch steps, the stick held at waist height, the mind quiet, the attention on the hands and the ground, not on the destination, and what to feel for. The pull, the stick, when it crossed underground water, pulled downward. Not violently, firmly, like someone pressing on the end of the stem with a finger. The closer the water, the stronger the pull. The deeper the water, the weaker the pull. The width of the underground flow determined how wide the pull zone was. A narrow underground stream produced a sharp, localized pull over a 2-foot band. A wide aquifer produced a broad, gentle pull over 20 feet. If you're enjoying this story, consider subscribing to The Average Farmer. We share stories like this every week. Vernon had been dowsing since he was 14. He'd found water for wells, springs, and buried pipes on his own property and on a dozen neighbors' properties over 63 years. He'd found the water line to his own barn in 1978 when a leak developed and the plumber couldn't locate the pipe. He'd found a buried spring that was feeding a wet spot in his pasture in 1985. He'd found the line to his neighbor's house in 1992 when the neighbor needed to tap it for a new bathroom. He'd also found pipes, not just water veins in the rock, actual metal pipes carrying water under pressure. The stick reacted to flowing water regardless of whether the water was in a pipe or in a natural underground channel. The reaction was the same: the downward pull, the firmness in the green wood, the unmistakable signal that water was below his feet. Vernon walked down from his porch at noon, after watching the water department crew fail for the fourth time with the electronic locator. "You boys looking for the main?" The crew supervisor, a man named Dennis Akers, 42 years old, 15 years with the water department, looked up from the locator screen. "We're trying. The EMF readings are all over the place. Too much interference from the other utilities. I can find it. You know where the pipe is?" "I can find where the pipe is." "How?" Vernon held up a forked stick, a fresh-cut peach branch, Y-shaped, 18 inches on each arm, green bark, the white wood showing where he'd trimmed the leaf nodes. He'd cut it from the peach tree in his yard that morning, watching the crew through his kitchen window, knowing he'd be walking down to the road before lunch. Dennis looked at the stick. He looked at Vernon. He looked at the $12,000 radio detection locator in his hand that had given him 3 different answers on 3 passes. "Mr. Slaughter, that's a stick." "It's a dowsing rod. My grandfather found water with one of these for 35 years. I've been using one for 63. I've found wells, springs, and buried pipes on every property on this road." "I can find your main." "Water witching. You want to find a 12-inch cast iron water main with water witching." "I want to find your pipe before you lose another 40,000 gallons. Your machine can't tell the water main from the gas line. My stick doesn't care about gas lines. It follows water." Everything was about to change. But Vernon had one thing the $12,000 locator didn't: the ability to detect what was inside the pipe, not just the pipe itself. Dennis didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He stood there with a $12,000 instrument that couldn't do its job and a 77-year-old farmer offering to do it with a piece of fruit tree. The crew was watching. The leak was running. The locating company wasn't coming until Friday. "Go ahead," Dennis said. "We're not finding it anyway." Vernon stepped into the road shoulder, the strip of ground between the pavement and his fence line where the main was buried somewhere within a 40-foot zone of uncertainty. He held the forked stick the way Otis had taught him, palms up, arms of the Y in each hand, stem pointing forward, wrists rotated to put the stick under tension. He started walking, slow, 6-inch steps, the stick steady, at waist height. His eyes on the ground ahead, not looking for the pipe, which was invisible, but looking at the ground for the surface signs that accompany a buried pipe. The subtle depression where the trench fill has settled over 50 years. The slight difference in vegetation color, where the disturbed soil retains more moisture than the native ground. The strip of slightly greener grass that follows a buried water line, the way a shadow follows a body. Vernon walked 40 feet from the road toward his fence. Nothing. The stick was neutral. No pull, No response. He turned and walked a parallel line, 10 feet closer to the road. Nothing. Another line, 10 feet closer. Nothing. On the fourth pass, approximately 12 feet from the road center line, the stick pulled. Not ambiguously. Not maybe. The stem of the forked stick dipped downward with a firmness that Vernon felt in both wrists simultaneously. The green wood bent against his grip. The pull increased as he continued walking along the line, a sustained, steady downward force centered on a band approximately 2 feet wide. "Here," Vernon said. He stopped walking. He pointed the stick at the ground between his feet. "The pipe is here, running north-south, about 12 feet from the center of the road." Dennis looked at his locator. The EMF reading at Vernon's position showed nothing clear. The same scattered signal he'd been getting all morning. The electronic instrument couldn't distinguish the water main from the surrounding metallic interference. "You're sure?" "I'm sure enough to dig, are you?" Dennis called his office. He requested a backhoe. The backhoe arrived at 1:30 p.m. The operator positioned the bucket at Vernon's mark, 12 feet from the road center line, and started digging. At 3 feet 8 inches, the bucket hit cast iron, a 12-inch cast iron water main, running north-south, 12 feet from the road center line. Exactly where Vernon's forked stick had indicated, the pipe. The water department's record said was at 22 feet was actually at 12. The pipe the electronic locator couldn't find in 4 passes. Vernon had found in 4 minutes of walking with a peach twig. That moment changed everything between Vernon and the water department crew. And Dennis Akers, standing at the edge of a hole looking at the pipe a forked stick had found, would never forget it. Let me tell you about the leak repair, because finding the pipe was only the first half of the problem. The leak was somewhere along the 1,400-foot run, and pinpointing it required walking the entire length. Vernon offered to walk the full route. Dennis, who had no better option, and whose $12,000 locator had been comprehensively outperformed by a piece of fruit tree, agreed. Vernon walked the 1,400 feet in 45 minutes, slow, steady, the stick held in tension, his feet feeling the ground, his hands feeling the stick. The pull was consistent for 1,200 feet, a steady downward force indicating the pressurized main, running 12 to 14 feet from the road. At approximately 1,050 feet from the south valve station, the pull changed. It intensified. The stick dipped harder, not gradually but sharply, as though the water beneath Vernon's feet had increased in volume or proximity. Vernon marked the spot with a stake. He walked forward. The intense pull continued for approximately 8 feet, then returned to the normal baseline. "Your leak is here," Vernon said, pointing at the staked section. "The pull is stronger in this section than anywhere else on the run. That means more water. More water means the pipe is leaking and the water is saturating the soil around the pipe. The saturated zone is about 8 feet long. Your break or your crack is somewhere in that 8 feet. Dennis called the backhoe back. They dug at Vernon's mark. At 3 feet 10 inches, they found the main, and they found the leak. A 6-inch longitudinal crack in the cast iron, running along the bottom of the pipe, weeping water into the surrounding clay. The clay around the crack was saturated, dark, soft, heavy with moisture for a radius of approximately 4 feet. Vernon's 8-foot pull zone matched perfectly. The saturated soil extended 4 feet on each side of the crack, creating an 8-foot band of increased underground water that the forked stick had detected from the surface. The repair crew clamped the crack with a stainless steel sleeve, a 2-hour repair once the pipe was exposed. By 5 p.m., the leak was sealed, the trench was backfilled, and the 40,000 gallons per day that had been flowing into the ground were flowing through the system again. Total time from Vernon walking down from his porch to the leak being sealed, 5 hours. Total cost of Vernon's involvement, 0. He refused payment, saying he'd been wanting to walk that stretch with his stick for years, and the water department had finally given him a reason. The private locating company called Friday morning to confirm their appointment. Dennis canceled it. We found the pipe. A farmer with a forked stick found it in 4 minutes after my locator failed for 4 hours. Saved me the $720. Let me tell you about the conversation at the water department, because the story of Vernon's dowsing created a reaction that split the department down the middle. Half the crew believed. They'd seen it. They'd watched the stick pull. They'd watched Vernon mark the pipe location and the leak location with a precision that their electronic equipment couldn't match. They dug at his marks and hit the pipe within inches. The evidence was in the ground, literally. The other half didn't believe. Dowsing was folklore. Water witching was superstition. The fact that Vernon had been right didn't prove the method. It proved that Vernon was lucky, or that he'd known where the pipe was from other clues and used the stick as theater. The skeptics pointed to the scientific literature, controlled studies that showed dowsers performing no better than chance when they couldn't see the terrain. Dennis was in the middle. He'd seen it work. He couldn't explain it. He wasn't willing to call it science, but he wasn't willing to call it luck when Vernon had located both the pipe route and the leak point with precision that his instruments couldn't achieve. I don't know if the stick finds water, Dennis told his supervisor. I know that Vernon Slaughter found the pipe and the leak faster and more accurately than our equipment. Whether that's the stick or Vernon, I don't care. The pipe is fixed. The water's flowing. And I didn't spend $720 on a locating service that was coming 2 days too late. The supervisor, a pragmatist who cared about results more than explanations, made a decision that the skeptics hated and the believers cheered. He put Vernon Slaughter on the department's contact list as a supplemental locating resource. Not an employee, not a contractor. A neighbor with a skill that the department couldn't explain, couldn't replicate with technology, and couldn't afford to ignore. Let me tell you about the JD dealer, because the equipment story wouldn't be complete without the man who sells the machines that the stick replaced. Kirk Ballard ran a utility equipment franchise in Rocky Mount. Trenchers, locators, boring machines. He sold radio detection locators to water departments across 3 counties. He'd sold Dennis's department the RD-8100 2 years earlier. $12,000, the most advanced electromagnetic pipe locator on the market. Kirk heard about the dowsing incident at a utility conference in Roanoke. Dennis told the story as a funny anecdote. The day the forked stick beat the locator, Kirk didn't find it funny. Dennis, you're telling a room full of utility professionals that a man with a stick found a pipe that my $12,000 locator couldn't find. I'm telling the truth. The RD-8100 gave me 3 different readings because of the interference from adjacent utilities. Vernon walked the route with a peach branch and marked the pipe at 12 feet from center. We dug at 12 feet and hit cast iron. Then he walked the route again and marked the leak location within 8 feet. We dug at his mark and found a 6-inch crack. The locator works on electromagnetic principles. It detects metallic pipes by their conductive properties. Your interference problem was a site-specific issue, too many adjacent metallic utilities. In a clear field, the RD8100 would have found that pipe in 5 minutes. We weren't in a clear field. We were on a road corridor with a gas line, a phone conduit, and an abandoned electrical conduit. The real world isn't a clear field. The real world has interference. And when the interference beat your locator, a 77-year-old farmer beat the interference. With a stick. With 63 years of practice, the stick is the tool. Vernon is the instrument. Your locator detects metal. Vernon detects water. In a corridor full of metal, the man who detects water has the advantage. Kirk didn't have a rebuttal. The RD8100 was designed to find metallic pipes by their electromagnetic signature. In a corridor with multiple metallic utilities, the signatures overlapped and the readings scattered. Vernon's method, whatever it was, responded to the water inside the pipe, not the metal around it. In a multi-utility corridor, that distinction was the difference between finding the pipe and walking back and forth for 4 hours with a $12,000 instrument that couldn't tell the water main from the phone line. Let me tell you about Vernon's subsequent calls because the water department didn't call him once. They called him 11 times over the next 2 years. 2003. 2 more pipe locations where electromagnetic interference prevented electronic locating. Vernon found both. 1 in 20 minutes, 1 in 35. Both were within 6 inches of his marks. 2004. 3 leak locations. Vernon walked the affected sections with the forked stick and marked the saturation zones. All 3 leaks were found within his marked areas. One was a pinhole leak that had been losing 5,000 gallons per day for an estimated 18 months. Too small for acoustic leak detection equipment to hear, but large enough to saturate the soil in a pattern that Vernon's stick detected from the surface. 2005. 6 combined locations, 3 pipe routes, and 3 leak pinpoints. Vernon's accuracy across all 11 calls. The pipe was found within 12 inches of his marks in every case. The leak was found within his marked zone in every case. 0 misses, 0 false positives, 11 calls, 11 successes. With a forked peach stick, cut fresh each morning from the same tree in his yard. Held in hands that had been doing this work since the Eisenhower administration. The private locating company, the one Dennis had canceled in 2003, lost 3 contracts with Franklin County in 2 years. Not because the county was choosing dowsing over technology. The county still used electronic locators as the primary method. But in the cases where electronic locating failed, the multi-utility corridors, the high interference zones, the sites where the AS-built records were wrong and the locator couldn't distinguish the target pipe, the county called Vernon instead of the $180 per hour service. The savings were measurable. 11 calls at an estimated $720 per call if the private service had been used. $7,920 in avoided costs. Vernon's compensation for all 11 calls, $0, and the satisfaction of being right, which Vernon valued considerably more than money. I don't charge for finding water, Vernon told Dennis. My grandfather never charged. Finding water's a gift. You don't sell a gift. You use it when it's needed, and you put it away when it's not. Let me tell you how this ends. Vernon Slaughter dowsed for the Franklin County Water Department until 2008, when he was 82. His hands still worked. His knees took him to the road and back. He averaged 4 to 5 calls per year, always the difficult ones, always the sites where the electronics failed, always the corridors where metal confused the machines and water told the truth. Vernon died in 2011 at 85. His peach tree still stands in the yard. His grandson, Tyler, can dowse. Vernon taught him the same way Otis taught Vernon. Tyler doesn't do it professionally. He doesn't do it for the water department. He does it on the farm, for wells and springs and the occasional buried pipe that nobody remembers laying. Dennis Akers is still with the water department. He carries an electronic locator in his truck. He also carries a forked peach stick, cut fresh every spring from Vernon's tree, which Tyler gives him permission to trim. The electronic locator is the first tool out of the truck. The forked stick is the second. When the first tool fails, the second tool works. I can't explain it, Dennis tells new hires. I've read the studies that say it doesn't work. I've read the physics that says there's no mechanism for a stick to detect water. And then I watched Vernon Slaughter find 11 pipes and 11 leaks with a piece of peach tree, and I stopped caring about the explanation. The pipe is where the stick says it is. That's enough. The Farmall 5-6. Oh, that Vernon used to maintain his fence line along Route 122. The fence that bordered the water main that started this story is in the barn. Tyler farms the 160 acres with newer equipment. But the farmall is maintained, and the peach tree is pruned every March the way Vernon pruned it, shaping the branches to grow in Y-forms, training the wood to produce the forked sticks that his grandfather had first put in his hands 63 years ago. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to The Average Farmer for more. We'll see you in the next one. The water department measured the records. The farmer measured the ground. The records said 22 feet. The ground said 12. The electronic locator measured metal. The forked stick measured water. And in a corridor full of metal, the man who measured water found the pipe that the machine measuring metal could not. $12,000 of electromagnetic engineering. 4 hours. 3 different answers. A forked peach stick. 4 minutes. 1 answer. The right one. Because the pipe doesn't care who finds it. The pipe cares that someone does. And the man with the stick, the man who learned from his grandfather, who learned from his father, who learned from a tradition older than the county itself, found it every time.